Hello and welcome to Music and Widescreen interview. I'm Mark, your host, and I'm here today with Transatlantic's Pete Trewavas. Hopefully I pronounced that somewhat closely.
Pretty good, actually, yeah.
All right, I watched one of your videos that you were, and you mentioned your name, and so I was like, okay, good. I don't have to ask how to pronounce the last name. I can give it a shot now, right?
Cool.
So
yeah.
So Pete, I came into this progressive rock thing kind of late, and I found out about Marillion maybe in 2002. So can you kind of tell me what was it like back in the early days when you started with the band?
With Marillion?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, we were. It was grassroots, really.
Yeah.
And it was still in the days when there was a club scene in the UK.
Right.
And so when Marillion started, we were playing pubs. There were like big pubs that would have bands and live music.
Right.
And then we progressed to the club scene a little bit, but we were having trouble. The band had tried to get a record deal before I joined the band. I joined the band in early '82.
Okay.
And Fish must have joined the end of '89 or the beginning of '81, something like that.
Right.
So when I joined, they'd done a few shows, and they'd done a Radio 1 show, actually. They'd done a Radio 1 show on with Diz, the old bass player. Right. And then there was a tour of Scotland in early '82. Fish had booked this little tour of Scotland on the back of the fact that they played Radio 1 and they were a big deal.
Right.
Hype and spin, really.
Right.
That's kind of what you need when you've got nothing else going for you, really. Right. And Fish was good at the talk. So he booked this tour, and then they parted company with Diz. And needed a bass player, so he asked me to join. But I had to audition. I'd never auditioned for a band before. I was kind of in a lot of local bands, and I'd just come back from America with one of the bands I was in. And so I was asked to go on this tour, and I thought, I'll go on a tour. And he said, we want you to join a band. I'm thinking, I'll go on the tour and see how it goes.
Right. Right.
And so we were doing all these. We were traveling in a van, and so the arrangement was we either every night we'd after the show we'd get to the next place, which was usually about 100 miles from the last one. So we're middle of the night, and if the key had been left for us, we could either unlock the hall we were going to be playing in, unload the van and sleep in the van, or leave the equipment in the van unguarded.
Oh, geez.
And sleep in the hall. It was really
not both. You couldn't. There wasn't room for you and the gear in the hall.
Well, there would have been. There would have been, but that's not. It wasn't going to be as comfortable.
Oh, gotcha. Right.
So. Yeah, so it was grassroots. It was very grassroots when we started, and then we progressed to playing places like the Marquee.
Right.
So playing in London was I played the Marquee before, and I think the band had as well. But it was quite a big deal to suddenly get more and more shows there and a bit more recognition. And there was a buzz. There was a buzz about the band, and I think it was partly due to the music we were playing. And bearing in mind, this was in the middle of this was in '82.
Right.
There was still, there was still punk and new wave and all of that going on, and people wondering what on earth a progressive rock band was trying to do, making any impression on anyone.
Right.
But
that's
the
kind of
fact
what I was
is
thinking.
that loads of people loved that music. And of course, even the bands, in the other genres like punk and new wave, they'd come from somewhere. They hadn't just suddenly, music hadn't just fallen into their ears when new wave started.
Right.
They'd grown up listening to the same bands as we had.
Right.
And you can tell that from the Stranglers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Chris Squire bass sound, and you've got lots of, you know, keyboards that were very kind of quite proggy. If you took the rock and roll element away from the Stranglers,
Right.
there was a lot going on there, you know. So anyway, we signed to EMI after, you know, several of the marquee occasions.
Nice.
We had to do a demo. EMI came down to one of the marquee shows we did, and they were packed, these shows.
Great.
And you know, we had a real fan base in London at the time.
Right.
We'd sort of built that up over a period of 6 months. And so they decided we had to do a demo. So we went to Manchester Square and did a demo in their demo studios.
Mm-hmm.
And it was decided between our manager and the record company that the demo wasn't good enough to play to anyone. So our manager said, "It's all right, boys. I've got another couple of dates, and we're just going to bring everyone from EMI to the shows."
Okay. What was wrong
and
about it?
And they'll see the numbers.
They'll see the people.
It'll make sense.
So let me ask you about that demo. Do you know what songs were on there, or what was the criteria?
Yeah, Market Square Heroes was on there.
Okay.
3 Boats Down from the Candy was on there.
Right.
And Grendel as well. Those were the 3 songs that were kind of chosen for us to do.
Right.
And then they became the first single as well.
How did they not like that? Was there not the energy, or were you guys a little inexperienced, or what was? I think
there was a little bit of inexperience in the studio, actually.
All right.
Or maybe a bit of studio nerves from 1 or 2 of us.
Right.
It didn't project as well as we did live.
Right.
For whatever reason. And of course, you know, Fish at the time, I mean, we were all learning our craft, but Fish was very theatrical.
Oh, right.
And of course, that just doesn't come across on record.
Okay.
You know, it's like, what's all this 12-minute rambling thing? And of course, on stage, it made perfect sense because he was prancing around and he was acting out what he was talking about, you know, the Beowulf legend.
Right. That makes sense.
So anyway, and then, of course, we recorded the first album in the Marquee Studios. And, you know, once we'd signed to EMI, they put a lot of money behind us. They decided that they'd spent money and they were going to, you know, they had a budget that they thought, this is how much money we should put behind a band and we'll see if it's got legs.
Right. Right.
But of course, you know, that was great for the first album. And the first album campaign, there was massive posters on all the mainline railway stations in the UK. Wow. So it was a big deal.
How did that feel?
That felt amazing, actually. Yeah, it was like, and then, you know, we had singles in the charts. I remember rushing to the car to listen to Radio 1 and listening to the chart show to hear our single Garden Party in the charts, actually in the charts. You know?
Right. That's awesome.
Something that we'd all dreamed about in our bedrooms as kids, you know, it's amazing.
Right. Well,
and then, of course, awesome. You know, it was great for a couple of years. And then the second album didn't do so well because a lot of money had been spent recording it and not, they didn't get the return they wanted. They sold a lot of records, don't get me wrong, but they didn't get the return they required.
Right. Okay.
And of course, that just compounds a debt that the record companies always want their bands to be just in debt, so that they've got a hold over them. So, well, listen, guys, you know you're in debt, but what we can do here, you can sign another contract and you can give us another couple of albums,
right,
and maybe you can get out of your debt. What do you think? You know, rather than you being able to go back to them and renegotiate your deal for for a jumbo jet or something.
So I wasn't going to ask this question so soon, but it leads in perfectly into this next thing, where here we are. I don't know, maybe it's 2008 or 9. I'm not quite sure, but I'm reading a book for we had a book club at work for the managers that were there, and we're reading a book called, maybe you'll guess what it is called, The Tipping Point. And who should show up in The Tipping Point but a band called Marillion? Are you familiar with the whole deal, I feel? And you guys were the predecessors, and the whole Kickstarter thing That's you.
Yeah.
That's you
That
guys.
was us. That was us. Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, it was a gradual. It wasn't just a wake up eureka moment. It was
right.
a slightly more gradual than that. Mark Kelly, our keyboard player, who has just got an album out called Marathon, actually.
Exactly.
Really good album.
Great album.
So he was very gear and tech savvy and computer savvy, and so was Steve Rothery, actually. They both had we all had the Commodore 64, and then we progressed to the Commodore 128.
Yeah.
You know, this is and Mark was the first person in the band to have an internet
proper
connection through his computer, where you could get to email.
Right.
Now,
it was text only, right? It was just text.
Email at the time was hooked up in the evenings
yes.
through colleges and various universities and various big companies that would allow you to use their computer space.
Yeah.
And people from around the world would get on and they'd play a game called Mud, which was multi-user dungeon, which was one of the first kind of Dungeons and Dragons and Discovery worlds.
Right.
But of course, it was basically in print.
Right.
And each page took, I don't know, a good couple of minutes to load.
Right.
You know, when you could see what was going on, and you know, so it was one of those kind of deals. But there were also these things called web pages that people could join. And some of the American fans had joined one of these, and Mark had joined as well, because he thought, oh, I'm on there, they're on there, let's talk to them.
Yeah.
And so we were in a situation where we were just leaving. This is about let me get to about late 90s. We were leaving an independent record label, and people were asking if we were going to be touring with the album. We'd just done an album, and people were asking if we were going to be touring with it. And Mark replied, no, we haven't got the money to do that, because our record company can't give us any tour support for America.
Right.
And we always lose, you know, usually a band will lose about $70,000 touring America. Right. And some guy on there he kind of decided to start a site where people could donate money. He said, well, why don't we all donate? He said, you know, rather than not being able to get the band over, why don't we all donate? I don't know what he put in.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it started at. And before we knew anything about it, there was about $400 in there. And it's like, no, 4,000, sorry. I'm getting the numbers wrong. There's about $4,000 in there. And it's like, well, hold on. Maybe we should keep an eye on this and have some kind of administrative process here, so no one can just run off with the money.
Right.
Because we didn't know who the guy was. Actually, the guy was a really, really nice guy.
Right. But you'd still know who he is or anything.
But so we kind of took over the campaign and said, anyone who donates anything over $10 will get a free record. Oh, because the premise of that was, we can't play in everybody's town.
Right.
But what we can do is, if we can raise enough money to go on tour, we'll play as many cities as we can, starting in the East Coast, and we'll record one of them, and we'll have a limited edition of that show. And that will be, you know, for the people who are paid more than $10. Right. And at that point, loads of people started donating money. Even people in England would say, well, I'll donate some money. Yeah. This sounds like a really good thing. Right. And there was no chance they were going to see a show. They just, you know, they fancied the idea of a limited edition disc. Right. And that raised about, I can't remember what it raised, but it raised enough money for us to start going over there. Nice. And we kind of shamed the record company into topping up the money so that we could actually tour. Right. And so obviously that was just a touring thing. But when we got to a stage where we didn't want to sign a record deal, we thought, well, Mark actually just suggested that, you know, we'd already had people pay in advance for something that they didn't even know they were going to, you know, when they were going to get. Right. Why don't we ask people if they'll pay for the making of the record? Right. And that was, so that's what we did. And it was like, well, I guess we'll just hit the button originally I was a bit against this. I was like, well, they're going to all want to get some, you know, they're going to want something for their money. And what if they start demanding what kind of music we write? And, you know,
so they got a label, a fan that becomes a label.
I paid you money. I want this on my album, you know. And Mark said, well, no, we'll have definite what you know, cans and can't do. But we raised a phenomenal amount of money.
Right.
We raised enough money to bring in a proper producer rather than kind of producing ourselves with our in-house engineer. We brought back Dave Megan. And so yeah, we brought Dave Megan in. Now Dave Megan at the time was quite a sort of well-known. He'd done a couple of things,
right?
And he'd worked on Fugazi, and so we brought him in, and he helped oversee the album and kind of put it together and stuff. And with that album, we had a free disc. We had a bonus disc,
right?
But the previous album we'd done with the independent record label, I've missed this bit out. This is a bit crucial.
Okay.
We decided to call it Marillion.com because we just bought the domain name. Now, at the time in England, nobody knew what .com meant. There was, you know, people were thinking that the internet was just a bunch of nerdy people playing games, you know, and talking to, you know, losers talking to girls from around the world.
Maybe they're girls, maybe
you know,
they're not.
The kind of, you know, all those kind of bad vibes.
Yeah.
So so we bought the domain name and we called the album that, and we decided the album cover would be pictures of fans. Any fan who sent a picture in would have their picture on the cover. And the cover had it had a grid of about 200, maybe 300 faces on it.
Right.
Nice. And everybody else that had signed up had their name in the booklet as well.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
So that grew then our database, basically. That's basically how we started a database. Everybody knowing what the Marillion website was going to be in advance, and
awesome.
And us having their details. And ever since then, we've kind of, you know, we've expanded on that.
Yeah, and we allowed for Marillion Weekend and such too. I'm probably
sure. Right. Yeah. We've the whole thing's grown, but the whole thing behind it was driven by need as much as the fact that the internet was there to use, and it was a cool thing. We realized early on that our two things, our fans had faith in us.
Right.
So if we asked them to do something, they would respond positively.
Right.
And also we could just talk to people instantly without having to post things, and it wasn't going to cost us a fortune, and there wasn't print involved. There wasn't pages and pages of stuff to you know, get typed up and send out in the mail. It was just, you type something, it's on a screen, you hit a button, and it goes out to everyone.
Yeah, so it's such a great thing that you took, that you were the forefront of kickstarting projects, and just a great story. And it's now it's a family. It's more than fans. It's a family. So
it's massive. I know. And in fact, you know, I mean, we could do a weekend where we weren't actually playing, I think, and the fans would just turn up.
Oh, for sure.
Because they all want to meet up with their friends that they, you know, they really do have friends around the world, and people have got met up and got married and stuff. I mean, it's amazing.
That is wonderful.
But, I mean, the best thing about all of it is the people who come up to you and say, you know, this song, you know, helped me through, you know, whatever, a crisis, or changed my life, or, you know, turn my life around or something.
Right.
You know, that's what really counts.
That is great. Now, that's actually a great segue into the next question I have for you. It's almost not a question. I was one of those people that came up to you one time, and in 2005 in Rozfest, when you were touring.
Yes, I remember Rozfest.
Kino. Yes.
With Kino, I was, yeah.
So I was with my wife and my friend that was first time I had met her in person, we had chatted in chat rooms on radio shows and such, and we had met for the first time. She's a huge Marillion fan. She wanted to talk with you, and she was way too shy to come up and talk to you. So I said, well, just follow me because I'm not too shy. And I came over to you because I had something I thought was worth saying. It was certainly isn't dramatic about getting me through a tough time or anything, but I told you I was in the last row, and I was in the last row because I didn't buy a ticket until Kino was announced, because you were a last minute replacement for, I can't remember who it was, a female fronted band that had to drop, and Kino was a last minute ad. And that was a great show. And I keep remembering, I was like, man, wait till people hear Kino, wait till they hear Losers Day Parade. They are gonna absolutely just love it. So do you remember anything about that show and Rosfest? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. It was, I mean, Kino was a great band, actually.
Yeah.
It was not really, John Beck was really on his game. I mean, one of the reasons why Kino formed was because Marillion used to tour with a band called It Bites.
Yes.
And John Beck was in It Bites with
John Mitchell.
Francis Dunnery.
Oh yeah, Dunnery, yeah.
And of course, you know, we used to tour together.
Right.
And I always used to watch John Beck, and he was kind of theatrical behind the keyboards, and you know, and the way his use of keys and everything I always admired. So Kino was a stopgap between the two, you know, the Transatlantic albums, Bridge Forever and The Whirlwind.
Right.
And you know, Thomas Webber phoned me up and said, have you got any plans for anything? And I said, well, I've always fancied working with John Beck. And he said, well, that's funny because John Beck's doing an album with John Mitchell at the moment.
Yeah.
So I went down to, I knew John. I knew
John Beck or John Mitchell.
So I went down to Reading, and John Mitchell and I spent a few months getting music together. And then John Beck joined us because I think he was on tour with somebody else at the time. He'd become more of a touring musician.
Right.
And but when he had the time, he came down and we kind of put together the Kino album. And what an album it was. It was great. But Rosfest was really interesting because it was nice for us. We'd done a couple of shows. We hadn't done much live work, actually.
Right.
But it was nice to go over to America and be part of something else. And, you know, it's very nice to be asked.
Yeah.
And people were really, you know, really appreciative of the band, which is nice.
Yeah, and
it's always nerve-wracking, you know, when you go on stage with because if it's Marillion or even Transatlantic, it's like I know how it works and everything, but with Kino, it was never quite. It was always like, is this working and is that working, and how are we going to go on stage? There's loads of things that you just take for granted when you've been in a band for ages that suddenly have to be worked out, you know.
Right.
So it's always a bit nerve-wracking with Kino.
Yeah, especially I can imagine the backline was very difficult for you and such.
Because we had hired backline. And
did you? Okay, yeah.
But we had really enthusiastic people helping out, actually. I seem to remember backstage. That was really cool.
Yeah, they always have a good staff on those, even when they're back in that was the second year of Rosfest. So
and there was a band that came on, and I think they were a Japanese band.
Could be.
And I think this is Rosfest, and they started playing the beginning of one of my favorite PFM songs.
Oh.
Can't remember what it's called now. And that got a massive. I was sat there thinking, "Oh, this is great. I hope they play this," and they didn't. But it was a bit of a teaser. But that little phrase got a massive cheer.
Yeah,
really from me.
I was trying to.
No. I mean, it's nice. I love festivals, you know, and I really like things like Cruise to the Edge because it's great to get to see bands from around the world that I wouldn't really normally bump into. Because I'd normally be playing, you know, with Marillion, we just play Marillion shows. And, you know, with Transatlantic, we're now in a situation where we just play Transatlantic shows.
Right.
So you know, because there's so much music, why would we necessarily have a support band?
Right.
So you don't always get to be part of a kind of a gang of bands.
Right. No, it is great. And
you
for
kind of
me,
miss that camaraderie you have when you're growing up, and there's a bunch of bands that have played together everywhere and are kind of doing the same kind of thing for the same reasons. Right. You kind of miss that when you get a bit more advanced.
Right. And like, I don't know if had you known like Arena, the guys for the Arena or Magenta before that show at all?
Sure. I mean, Mick Pointer was obviously in Marillion originally with me before Ian joined.
Right.
And the guys from Pendragon, because Clive Nolan is in Pendragon.
Right.
So as well. And the guys from Pendragon used to support Marillion.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So in fact, we might have supported them 1 or 2 times as well, because they were we were like big in the just outside of London area, and they were big in the kind of where were they from, Stroud and around, you know, Bath and all of that area. They kind of that was their kind of turf. And then there was a band called Palace in Scotland.
Oh yeah. Right, they had 17 years
so
between
you'd
albums.
Like go to other bands, you know, they'd support you where you were big, and you'd support them where they were big. That's kind of how it used to work when we were trying to, you know, make something of ourselves.
Right.
Oh yeah, Rosfest with Kino. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah,
good memories.
Good. That's great, because I had mentioned to you, I said I really like this album. I came here because you guys were added to the bill, and you said your answer to that was, we're very quietly or privately, something like that, proud of this album. Almost like it was maybe, and I was inferring from that was that maybe it was a little poppy for Prague, and maybe, you know,
I guess that was the idea. The idea was to be much more of a Mike and a Mechanics than a, you know, we wanted to write songs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted tunes that people would go away humming.
Right. Well, you got
and of course, be proggy as well. You know, you can when the mood kind of took us. But the idea was every song had to start off as a song first, and then you can embellish it.
Right, strong melodies. It was an album based on strong melodies, and then you maybe insert. It's like, oh, you know, maybe this is 4/4. Maybe we could do something different. And
for sure. Yeah,
it seems like Losers Day Parade. It seemed like the first 6 or 7 minutes of it was like maybe the guitar was a little bit, I don't want to say out of tune, but a little bit harsh. And then all of a sudden, at like the 7-minute mark, it just locks in.
Tune. No, I didn't play it.
No, but on purpose. I mean, it was harsh, you know. Yeah. And then that just all of a sudden it just kind of locked in. With
I think it was a kind of anger thing.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, you know, like that type of thing. Yeah, like that.
It was supposed to be discordant. It was supposed to be like that, jarring.
Yeah. Really. Absolutely. I mean, that's fine.
Just for effect. Yeah.
Right. Well, sometimes when things go, you know, it's a great way to set up something. I think that time of the night, there's actually a Marillion song that might be 5/4 in the beginning, and then it locks in the 4/4, and you're like,
yeah,
wow, that's really interesting because
that time of the night.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a 5/4, and then it goes into 4/4, right? Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. Because
because it starts off as a piece of music that leads out of Warmet Circles.
Right.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah. Probably.
I think it does. and then it suddenly moves. Yeah. Well, you know, transitions like that. I love things like that.
Right. You know, that's a great place to get to my next question, which was, so here you are, you know, we're going to talk about the Transatlantic finally. When you hear the mixes, you know, as a bass player, how do you feel like with this album? Do you ever feel like I haven't had a bass player on the show with your pedigree. And I was just curious, do you ever feel like you can't hear the bass enough, or I mean, how do you get involved with the mixing process? Because it seems like bass is always the last thing on people's minds, that, you know, there's always these drum solos and guitar solos, and a bass player, I don't know, never seems to get like top billing in a mix.
Oh, well, no, yeah, you know, I come from a background of not really ever wanting to. I'm not really a soloist anyway. I'm not a virtuoso player.
Right.
I came from, I grew up in the 60s in England, so the Beatles were heavily featured, and tons of other great bands as well, like the Who,
right,
and Small Faces, and lots of other bands with really good tunes. And so I came from, but McCartney was really my first love of bass, I guess. And then after that, of course, progressed on to progressive music with the likes of Caravan, Focus, Genesis, yes, blah blah blah, everyone. But when I listen, I'm very lucky because I'm in a position to be able to surround myself with the right people.
Right.
And so people like Rich Mauser, who mixes Transatlantic, and Mike Hunter, who mixes Marillion, they're kind of really into bass. Bass.
Nice.
But well, Mike is a bass player as well, but Rich, I don't know what Rich plays, but he's got a great pair of ears, and he just he does love it, because he's come up to me, particularly after the Whirlwind, actually, funny enough, he came up to me and said, "Man, I love your playing on the Whirlwind." He said, I could just solo the bass and just listen to it on its own. It's like it's got its own musical thing going on.
Right. Well, it does follow the melody.
That's what I try and do. Yeah. I try and write something. I try and write a composition that is basically going to be, helping the rest of the music and emphasizing what I think needs emphasizing. If that's rhythm, it'll be more rhythm based. If that's melody, I might bring in a melody from earlier on in the album, or I might reference something from a previous album, or I might just go off and learn almost like arranging a piece of classical music. I will arrange the bass line so that it flows, and we'll move through all of the scales that Neil puts the music into. Right. Because Neil likes to change key a lot.
Yeah, which must be difficult.
It's cool because it's a challenge, and challenging is always good.
So as we move here now into the Absolute universe, where did that actually? Where were the seeds of this record?
Oh, the seeds of this record.
I mean, how did it kind of start up?
I guess it started like all records start, really, with a conversation. Okay. We've been doing all our different bands, Marillion, Neil Morse Project, Neil Morse Band, Flower Kings, and Flying Colours as well, actually. We've been doing some of these cruises, Cruise to the Edge being the one that Marillion's mostly plays. And we'd meet up now and again, because obviously 2 of us are European, 2 of us are the other part of America. So, we'd meet. When we'd meet up, we'd naturally have a conversation about, well, what do we think? Is there any chance of doing? Anybody fancy doing some work together? Right. Because after the last tour, there was a bit of reluctance for us to get. To do anything too soon. I think we needed a bit of space. Right. And so a natural kind of amount of time elapsed, and we decided that we all agreed we'd like to do another album. And we tried to then find out when would be a good time to do that. Now, it's much, much harder than you would think. To get the 4 of us diaries aligned. I'm sure. It's like the heavens have to open and the stars have to align, and then suddenly there's a 2-week gap. We could go there. So we aimed for 2019. We decided the first thing we did was pick a year. Right. So we picked a year. About 3 years ago, we picked 2019. A 2-week period in 2019 specifically, or just we're going to 2019? It was like, let's try and do something then in a year's time. I mean, I think it was 2018 the last time we met up, and it was like, well, let's try and do something next year then. Right. Because I had some free time. Royna possibly had some free time if he made time. And like Mike was like, well, listen, if I know this is going to happen, I can make some free time. So let's, you know, because Mike's in so many projects, it's ridiculous. So we decided on a rough time scale.
Right.
And like we tried for 2 weeks, sometime the second half of 2019. And at that point, I guess we all started seriously getting music together. That's when I started writing for this album.
Okay.
And I think, you know, usually when these things start, Neil has probably got an idea of what his next, you know, big writing thing is going to be.
Right.
So he had like 90 minutes of music he brought to the table. So we met up in Sweden. We couldn't go to America because it was proving to be too difficult and too financially too expensive, really, for Royner and I to get there.
Right.
So we opted for Sweden. Went to a studio that Royner knows very well called Fenwick. And so Neil had about 90 minutes of music. I had my 45 minutes maybe of music. Royner had like a ton of songs. He had some long songs and he had some short songs and then he had some just wild music. Right. He said, well, this is interesting. I think this is interesting. Could be something, you know. And really the idea, the premise, the idea was that any of the music and any of the lyrical themes or ideas could be used anywhere. It's all up for grabs. It's all, you know, it's all free to arrange how we wanted.
Nobody's holding back their favorite thing. Everything's
exactly,
out there.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. Right. Well, you know, so we'd all listened to each other's ideas in advance and made notes on what we all thought we liked and we'd like to work on. So the first day, I think Royner was already at the studio.
Right.
Mike and Neil and I flew into Gothenburg and we drove for like 2 hours to get to where the studio was.
Right.
And the first thing we did was unload the car and then start listening. We had a little ghetto blaster and we started listening to the ideas.
Right.
Mike got a whiteboard out and because he's normally in charge of the whiteboard, wrote down all the names of the potential songs and whose songs they were.
Right.
And then it's like, right, okay, so where do we want to start?
Right.
And Neil, I guess we started with what became my screen's gone off. I can't see the titles of the songs. We started with
maybe.
Yeah, no, I've got it. We started for Reaching for the Sky.
Okay.
I guess. And Higher Than the Morning. And we just started with something that was going to be fairly simple, basic, kind of sounded quite upbeat, a bit transatlantic-y. Right. Because we kind of got our own sound now. That's the thing. We've done these albums, you know, we've done these 4 albums and it's like, yeah, there's a transatlantic sound and there's a transatlantic image, you know, so, which is cool.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to know what you're working to.
Right. Well, certainly you've always had, it seems like if I want bombast from any one of you guys, I'm going to go listen to Transatlantic because it's theatrical. Yeah. It's emotional. It is, you know, it could be spine chilling even, you know, because here we are. This is going to start with an overture. Almost, you just know it's going to. Yeah. Whether or not it's called an overture.
Yeah. Well, what happened is that we started with a more song based because that was kind of an easier way for us to move our way in, and at that point, that's when we actually start, you know, rearranging things and rewriting things, and maybe if we want two things to go together, but they don't, it's like, well, what we need is, because there's at least one of it, you know, every one of us will have at least 2 or 3 ideas of how we could do that. Right. I'm like, well, I've got this, so this would be cool if we could do this. And I'll be like, hold on, because I think it'd be really good if we did this instead. And, you know, and everyone is like, well, I was thinking, you know, I have this idea and maybe that could work. So we try a few things out and see what fits. And so we moved on and started about a third of the way in the album and moved on for a few songs. And then we went back and started to build the overture, because at that point we'd already established that there were going to, we already had like 3 or 4 themes that we gradually started working on. I'd be like, well, it'd be good, if there was an overture that could establish the themes in the first place. Then when you get to them, they kind of feel like coming home,
Yeah. Right.
And again, at the end of the album, we bring a few themes back.
Right.
Because, because you want a sense of the whole thing having a wholeness to it. The album, we want it to have a completeness and a wrapping up of all of the subject matter and everything.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's very organic and it's very fast and furious. We really do think on our feet.
Right. Well, that tells me that you guys have a lot of good synergies, stuff that,
we do
between you, and you're kind of on the same page when it comes to what goes in and what goes out. There's probably nobody feels like they own anything, and they're going to feel really bad if this is, maybe this is changed or altered, or if this doesn't make the album, Yeah,
right? That's not what it's about. I mean, particularly for me, my whole ethos really with working with guys like Mike and Neil and Royner are, I know what I'd do with my music.
Right.
So I'm more interested in seeing what other people would do with it, because that's much more fun for me, because, I might be surprised. I mean, I might be unpleasantly surprised, but pretty much know that I'm going to be pleasantly surprised,
Yeah. And it's probably how you got your, you say you have a sound, and I think the synergies are really how the sound became right. It was the synergies first, and then the sound.
It was,
yeah.
I mean, it was born out of, I guess, I don't know, but it really established itself well, I think, on the Whirlwind. Actually, I think by then that was like, oh, okay, that's definitely Transatlantic finding their place.
Right, finding their place. And I kind of thought that too, but I thought maybe that was because it was the first time I saw you guys live. You played the Park West for that tour in Chicago. So
we did. I love the Park West.
Yeah, it's so good. For people that don't know the Park West, that might be from not from Chicago or America even, you could see it the most. If anybody's ever seen it, they saw it on Porcupine Trees, Arriving Somewhere But Not Here DVD. That is the Park West. So, it's a great place with a hybrid of sitting and standing, and really nice atmosphere. Sound is outstanding.
Yeah, so it's kind of like there's a lot of small theaters in countries like Holland that are like that.
Right.
So it's got a like you say, sitting and standing, but it's quite the seating goes up quite high.
Right.
And it's not too, you're never too far, you don't never feel too far away from the band, which is nice. Right.
Now, and for the band, I think they draw the energy that they would like to get from the audience, because the front is the hybrid of seating and standing. So let's talk. So about this album, I think it's outstanding. I've been very fortunate to have received it early, and I will say that however good you think this album is, it's probably a little bit better than that. It's really, really great. I think that, and I don't say that lightly. I get hundreds of submissions in, and I mean, I always know I'm going to get a certain quality when I hear Transatlantic, but this is outstanding. I think that anybody that's ever liked anything Transatlantic has done, they will like this album. It might even convert a few people. I don't know if there are any dissenters out there, but I think it's worth giving a listen to this.
There's bound to be a couple, album. Right?
It's got to be. I mean, it's prog, right? It's not pop. It's not supposed. Everybody's not. It's not supposed to be liked by everybody. It's supposed to, right? You know what I mean? Into a degree. Yeah. So
I think so.
So I think that but I think that this is could be very widely accepted. If this came out in 1978, this would be on the charts, right? You know, I mean, it's got some
probably
great stuff in there.
It is prog, but there are songs. I mean, it's not hard to listen to.
Right. But it does take a few listens.
Quite understandable music, and it's yeah, it's a good listen. It's a good listen.
So I think that this is kind of like, I like some geeky board games, and I think that I like the games that are easy to learn the rules, but difficult to figure out the strategy. And that's the analogous I'll use for this album. It's very easy. It's very easy to like it on the first listen. Yet, it took me maybe some people would take less. It took me about four listenings where I start getting the nuances, and that there's a lot more going on here. I still don't have the subject matter down. Do you want to talk a little bit about the subject matter of this album, or is that giving too much away, or how do you want? What do you want to say about that?
It's a pretty vast concept, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it started its life before COVID.
Yeah.
But then, particularly with Breath of Life, the abridged version.
Right.
There's Neil wanted to bring in some of that subject matter, and interestingly enough, one of my songs called Solitude was about somebody kind of struggling with kind of with depression, or a bit of kind of mental instability,
right?
And so that kind of fitted in quite well with the fact, because the fact is, there's a lot of people around the world that have been stuck indoors on their own for a long time, or like young families in tower. I mean, I don't know how a family in a tower block that can't go out are supposed to cope,
right?
And that's been happening for months in major cities in England, and I'm sure it has in America as well, in certain states.
Yep. Just go to the grocery store.
It must just be, very, very difficult times for everybody. So some of that subject matter has taken, with some of the lyrical matter has taken on that kind of meaning,
right?
And really, it's kind of, I mean, it's called The Absolute Universe, and it really is quite a kind of vast subject of, soul searching and finding yourself, and, doubting yourself as well in certain songs.
Right.
There's Owl Howl, there's Bully as well. Bully is one of the songs on Forevermore, the extended version.
Right.
And, that deals with, how you deal with someone who's like overpowering in your life.
Right. So you want to talk about the different types of, we have two versions of this.
We do.
And do you want to tell people what they should do? I would say, I'm not quite sure why they would get the abridged one, but maybe if you're really on a tight budget, or what's the deal?
Well, what we're going to do is give you a list of instructions of how to, a bit like when you get a really complicated board game. There'll be a list of instructions of how to proceed.
Right.
No, I mean, the thing about these kind of projects is, obviously, I think it's all valid, and people should really want to try and dig into all of it.
Right.
So, but at the same time, if you don't have that budget, then it's available on 2 different CDs, and either one is a good listen. The thing is that it's 2 different experiences of the same journey. In the same way that 2 people can travel together, and have completely different experience on the same journey, because we all see things differently. I mean, even if I remember there was a documentary I was watching about police, interviewing people about crime scenes and things. And one of the things that really came across was, you can ask 10 people about the exactly same incident, and you'll get 10 completely different answers.
Right.
Perception. They'll all see different things, and they'll all describe different things, and they'll all forget different things. So, it's kind of that sort of deal. It's a great album, either one you decide to listen to.
It is.
So I think if you, so the reason why we started off doing 2 versions was there was a thought in the band that maybe recording something that was so long was not as I kind of broached the subject early on in Sweden. I said, you know, this might benefit from just being a little bit more concise in places, maybe getting to, you know, a couple of the songs a bit quicker here and there, and maybe tightening it up a little bit so it's a bit more, you know, listenable.
Right.
So I'm very aware of the fact that, you know, there's a lot of people don't have a lot of time in their lives these days.
Right.
And with the advent of social media and clips of, you know, people watch a minute of a clip and turn it off. What's the next thing? What can I be into next?
Right.
And I don't know, progressive fans aren't necessarily doing that.
Right.
But I just thought the album might benefit from that. And Neil went away and must have been thinking the same thing, because he came kind of halfway through the recording process. And at this point, we'd all been in lockdown and we were all recording completely individually in our own studios. And he sent an email saying, am I crazy? And he said, I've been thinking that this album should be shorter. And this is my proposal. He'd come up with an edited version of the album. But what he'd done is that he'd edited certain things out, and other things he'd extended, and other things he'd like written. He said, I want Pete's stuff. There's a theme I play. There's a theme I wrote that is featured towards the end of the album, which was never featured at the beginning for some reason. It was just kind of left out. And he said, I want Pete's theme to be featured at the beginning, so I've re-recorded a bit of it. You know, he kind of demoed it in his studio, being the kind of house band. And he said, you know, see what you think. And obviously there's a few changes I've made, and you'll have to replay, you know, that stuff, just to match up all the sounds and everything. Because it's like, he didn't want to be the guy playing all of the instruments.
Right.
It might sound a bit weird. So, so there's a few songs where Neil had written a melody, you know, lyrics and melody, and sung a song. And I'm thinking particularly of Rainbow Sky. You know, Royner had taken Rainbow Sky and gone in a completely different direction, very cool direction, I may add. And written other lyrics and completely different melody. It was like, wow, this is like a different piece of music. You know, it was. So that was really that was the start of us thinking, what are we going to do? You know, we've got to start making some decisions here.
Right.
And then Mike said, well, why do we have to make, you know, we don't have to fall out over this, because we clearly don't want to fall out over this, because it's just going to take too much time to resolve all of this stuff.
Right.
So why don't we just have two versions? And once that was decided, we had to run it past the record company, and they were like, well, how's that going to work? Because you can't just sell this. You can't just sell half the album edited from the other version. That's not going to work. It's like, no, trust us. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is creating a completely different thing.
That's why
different parts. Royner, and luckily though, I mean, you know, Neil and Royner had played so much music on, you know, and just so many different parts and you know, overdubs that when it came to deciding what was going to go on which album, that we could have very, very, very different musical approaches.
That's amazing. I'm so glad I asked you that, because when I listened to both albums, I'm like, this is not a subset of the other album.
No, it really isn't. No,
it's a whole different thing
that way as well. I mean, Rich didn't just cut and paste stuff from one to the next. Rich Mauser sat down and mixed one album and then mixed another album in a completely different way, featuring completely different pieces
of music.
And we re-sung lyrics and harmonies and all sorts of other cool things.
So can people? Is there a package to buy both? I mean, this is really what we need to tell people. They need to be buying both.
There is a package to buy both.
Okay. All right. And what? How? Let's wind this down. I feel bad. I took you for an hour here.
That's okay. So basically,
where do we buy it? How can you buy it? Vinyl? What's CD downloads? Give me the whole spiel.
Okay, so everything is available
Okay.
from, you know, your usual sources, but
Right.
the best places to get them
Right.
would be the Inside Out shop,
Okay.
the Radiant Records shop
Okay.
in America, which is Neil's shop. Now he's
Right.
got a couple of specials, so that if you order stuff from him, you might get an Absolute Universe T-shirt if he's
Okay.
got any left.
Okay. Cool. You can see that. Absolutely. Does it have that on there? Does it have the?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. I just know that he's selling one.
All right.
Now Royner's shop, the Flower Kings shop, has he's selling the album as well.
Okay.
And Racket Records, which is Marillion Online.
Okay.
The Marillion Online shop is called Racket Records.
Okay.
And they're selling it. Now, the Inside Out shop,
right,
the Racket Records shop and Radiant Records are selling a standalone version of the Blu-ray, because if you buy the box set, the ultimate box set edition, which has everything in it,
right,
it has the two vinyls. It has, it has the two different vinyls,
right,
gatefold with the original gatefold sleeves in. They're not like just you get a black sleeve with your vinyl,
right, nice.
And it has the CDs, and it has a Blu-ray disc in it, and that is the ultimate. I mean, that's got everything. It's got a booklet. It's got a booklet and everything in it. But if you can't afford that, if you could go to one of the three shops I've mentioned,
right,
and you could get the Blu-ray and the two CDs, and you would have the package pretty much. You wouldn't have the booklet. You wouldn't have all of the information.
Right.
But now the Blu-ray is cool because the Blu-ray has a 5.1 mix, which is an extended version.
Right.
So what it is that Mike went to town on this and chose his kind of favorite bits from both versions and made an even longer 5.1 mix, which was then put together and remixed. So that's another version of the album, really. Okay. It's got a documentary of the making of, right, which has footage of us recording in Sweden. Yep. And us chatting about it. Nice. And it's got some other goodies as well. It's probably, okay. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. It is a big deal. I mean, the thing is, it's never been done before, so we've had to answer a lot of questions, and people were asking all sorts of things because they didn't quite understand what it was they were buying and how they were buying. You know, right? Well, if I buy this, what am I getting? And if I buy that, what am I getting? And right. Well, it is. I mean, but if you buy the vinyl in the front, generally, I think if you buy the vinyl, you get the CDs as well. Okay, because I think the vinyl, that would be about 10 vinyls, so probably I would say the vinyl maybe doesn't have. How many? What does the vinyl have on it? Is it a subset? Okay. I need to get to the nitty gritty, don't I? Well, you know, we're definitely gonna. Yeah, no, I know. Because I'm curious now. I just bought a record player. Right. So the Absolute Universe Breath of Life, which is the abridged version, is available as a single CD. Right. A gatefold, 2 LP and CD. Okay. Gotcha. So that's got two album gatefold or a digital album. Right. Which is download. Right. So that's how that is available. Right. The Absolute Universe Forevermore, which is the extended version, which is the long version, which basically that's the version we ended up with when we left Stockholm. Okay. Sweden. Sweden. Yeah, Sweden. Yeah. That is available as a 2 CD limited edition. Okay. 3 LP plus 2 CD box set. Because there's a lot of music on there. There's like 90 minutes of music. So that's on 3 CDs. Right. 3 LPs and 2 CDs. Right. Or the digital download of that. Okay. And if you want the Ultimate Edition, right, which is the Absolute Universe Ultimate Edition, comes with 5 LP plus 3 CDs plus
Okay.
Blu-ray box set.
Okay.
Contained within a foil finish lift-off lid, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
16-page booklet.
Wow.
And a 60 by 60 poster.
Nice.
Includes both versions of the albums, over 5 LPs and 3 CDs,
Right.
plus a Blu-ray. The Blu-ray has a 5.1 mix, a documentary, and I think it has other mixes as well. I think there were various ways of listening to the 5.1.
I'll
But
tighten
don't
that.
quote
I'll
me on
find
that.
out and tighten that up.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, I'm reading that from the press
release.
I've
Yeah.
got on
Right.
because I can't remember all of that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I didn't mean to throw you under the bus here. I didn't realize.
No, that's all right.
It's,
Yeah, no, that's okay. I luckily I land well.
Yeah. Pete, let me thank you for hang with me after we are sign off here. But I just want to thank you for spending this time with me, and it's really been great to get to know you a little bit and to see your love for music and this album.
Well, I do. I love music very much.
Yes, it's very.
I've always had a passion for it, and what always surprises me because I'm an old guy these days. You know, I'm in my 60s now, and it does surprise me that, you know, what was great about meeting up again with Transatlantic, and the beauty of having the time away, I guess, is that when we got back in the studio and we started playing together, it was like, yeah, this is happening.
Yeah,
you know, this is really cool.
Magical,
and we all, you know, you can tell we all felt it. We all were passionate about what we were doing.
That's great.
And that's nice. It's great when music can do that, and music does that. You know, that's one of the things that music is good for. It's good for the soul, isn't it? Music.
It is. I wish you good luck with this, but I know there's going to be.
Thank you.
It's going to go well. You don't need my luck. There is quality up and down, and I bet you when I see the physical copy, I'm gonna feel the same way about the production values and such. It'll match the music, I'm sure. So. Thank you so much, and and we'll be looking forward to seeing how well this does. It's just a matter of not if it'll do well, but just how well it'll be received.
Yeah, I'm hoping. Well, you know, times are tight at the moment, aren't they?
It's true. It's true.
But let's hope it does well.
All right.
I mean, it's got, you know, if anything can do well, I think this can.
Yes, for sure.
So, you know, we'll just wait and see.
All right, great. How did that feel?
That felt amazing, actually. Yeah.